I was kneeling in the backyard, watching Eliza draw a rainbow on the patio stones, when the side gate creaked open. My daughter looked up from her chalk, her small fingers smudged with purple and gold. She had been working on that mural all morning, a rainbow arching over a little house, flowers in every color she owned. The afternoon sun filtered through Grandma Ruth's oak tree, the one she planted 40 years ago, and for a moment everything felt peaceful, safe, like the world outside our fence could not touch us here. Then I saw my father. Gerald Morrison walked into my backyard without knocking, without calling, without any warning at all. Behind him came a woman I had never seen before, clutching a clipboard, wearing a blazer with a real estate logo stitched across the pocket. My father did not say hello. He did not ask how I was doing. He stopped in the middle of the yard, surveyed the property like a man appraising cattle, and spoke 6 words that changed everything. "Stop being selfish. Your sister needs this yard." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could form a single word, a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Teresa stepped out first, sunglasses perched on her head, smiling like she had already won something. Her husband Kevin followed, hands in his pockets, that smirk he always wore when he knew a secret I did not. And then the twins. Mason and Mia, 6 years old, grabbing their scooters from the trunk and racing toward the backyard like they owned it. Mason reached the patio first. He rode his scooter directly through the center of Eliza's chalk drawing, his wheels cutting through the rainbow she had spent hours creating. Mia followed, giggling, crushing the flowers beneath her. In 3 seconds, my daughter's entire morning was just smeared color on concrete. Eliza did not cry. She did not scream or push back or demand an apology. She simply bent down, gathered her broken chalk pieces, and stepped aside. She made herself smaller. She made room. I watched my 8-year-old daughter shrink herself to accommodate people who did not even see her, and something inside my chest cracked open. The realtor would not meet my eyes. She kept glancing at my father, then at the ground, her pen tapping nervously against her clipboard. She knew something was wrong here. She just did not care enough to say it. Gerald cleared his throat, adopting the tone he always used when delivering commands dressed up as reason. He explained that Teresa and Kevin lived in a cramped apartment. The twins needed space to run, to play, to grow. This house had a big yard, a beautiful yard. It was only logical that the children who needed it should have it. "The house will be listed next week," he said. "I have already contacted the realtor. We will get a fair price." I tried to interrupt. I asked, what about me? What about Eliza? Where exactly were we supposed to go? My father waved his hand like he was brushing away a fly. "There is a garage apartment on the property," he said. "Small but adequate. You can stay there, temporarily, until you figure something out." Teresa sighed dramatically beside him, one hand pressed to her chest like she was accepting an award for suffering. She talked about how hard it had been, raising twins in that tiny apartment. She talked about sacrifice. She never once looked at me while she spoke. Then she turned to Kevin and muttered something under her breath. I caught only fragments. "Well, Mom already agreed to..." She stopped mid-sentence. Kevin shot her a sharp look. She changed the subject immediately, but I had heard enough. Mom knew, my mother knew about this, and she had not warned me. I asked how any of this was possible. The house belonged to Grandma Ruth. Ruth left it to me. I had the paperwork. I had been paying property taxes for 3 years, maintaining the garden, replacing the roof when it leaked last winter. Gerald reached into the realtor's bag and pulled out a folder. Inside was a document I had never seen before, a revised version of Ruth's will. According to this paper, Ruth left everything to Gerald. He was the legal owner now. He could sell whenever he wanted. I stared at the page. The will I received after Ruth's death was clear. The house was mine. I remembered the lawyer reading it aloud. I remembered crying in that office, feeling like Ruth was still protecting me even after she was gone. But this document told a different story. And when I looked closely at Ruth's signature at the bottom, something felt wrong. The letters were too jagged, too uncertain. The handwriting did not match the woman who had taught me to write my name in careful cursive. When I pointed this out, Gerald snatched the paper back. He said I was being paranoid. He said this was exactly why no one in the family took me seriously. Always making problems. Always being difficult. Eliza tugged at my sleeve. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" That question broke something inside me that I did not know could still break. I looked at my daughter, this brave little girl who had already been abandoned once before I adopted her, and I saw her wondering if she was the problem, if her existence was the reason we were being thrown out. Then I looked at my family. My father, who had borrowed money from me for years and never repaid a cent. Teresa, whose credit card debt I paid off twice. Kevin, whose failed business was funded by a loan I gave him, a loan that somehow became a gift when repayment came due. I had been their safety net, their backup plan, their ATM with a heartbeat, and the moment I had something they wanted, they came to take it. The twins got birthday presents from my parents every year. Eliza got nothing. The family photos on my father's mantle showed Teresa's children, their milestones, their smiling faces. Eliza appeared in none of them. To my family, she was not real. She was just the girl I collected after Marcus died. Teresa laughed at something Kevin whispered. It was the same laugh I remembered from childhood, the laugh she used whenever she got what she wanted and I did not. For a moment, I did what I had always done. I went quiet. I nodded. I told myself maybe they were right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should just accept this. My mind started cataloging what I would need to move into the garage apartment. How I would explain to Eliza that our home was not really ours. How I would squeeze our lives into 200 square feet and pretend it was enough. But then I looked at my daughter again, still holding those broken chalk pieces, still standing aside, still making herself invisible so others could take up more space. If I accepted this, I would teach her that love requires erasure, that belonging means disappearing, that she should spend her whole life shrinking. Gerald walked over and put a hand on my shoulder, the way he always did when delivering bad news wrapped in false kindness. "Your mother agrees, by the way. She called me last night. She thinks this is the best solution for everyone. Diane, my mother, the one person I thought might defend me, she knew about this. She approved it. And she said nothing." Gerald walked away to join Teresa and Kevin. They huddled together near the oak tree, pointing at different parts of the yard, already planning their future in my home. And I stood alone, holding my daughter's hand, realizing that in this family, I had always been alone. But something pressed against my hip. In my pocket, I felt the edge of an old envelope, one I found in Ruth's jewelry box last week but never opened. Her handwriting on the front. "For Rosalind, when you need it most." I did not know it yet, but my grandmother had been waiting for this moment. She had been preparing for it long before she died. The house was silent now. Gerald had driven away without saying goodbye. Teresa loaded the twins into her SUV with promises of ice cream. The realtor escaped as quickly as she could, avoiding my eyes until the very last moment. Even the birds in Ruth's oak tree had stopped singing, as if they understood that something sacred had been violated. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall where Grandma Ruth's clock still ticked. 9:47 in the evening. I had not eaten since breakfast. My coffee had gone cold twice. I kept replaying my father's words, searching for the moment where I misunderstood, the angle where this made sense. I found nothing. Eliza was finally asleep. It took 3 stories instead of 1. She kept asking questions I could not answer. Why did Grandpa seem angry? Why did the boy break her drawing? Why were those people measuring our yard? I told her everything would be okay. I did not know if that was true. The envelope sat on the table in front of me, the one I found in Ruth's jewelry box last week. Her handwriting stared back at me like a message from another world. "For Rosalind, when you need it most." I had meant to open it a dozen times. Something always interrupted. Something always seemed more urgent. Now nothing was more urgent than understanding what my grandmother wanted me to know. But before I could tear the seal, my mind drifted backward. To the last time I saw my mother. To the conversation that should have warned me. 3 weeks ago, I visited my parents for Sunday dinner. Gerald was locked in his study, as usual, doing whatever important things he claimed required privacy. Diane was alone in the kitchen, washing dishes by hand even though the dishwasher sat empty beside her. She always did that when she was anxious. Kept her hands busy so no one would notice they were shaking. I asked if everything was okay. She hesitated too long before answering. "Fine," she said. "Everything is fine." But her eyes kept darting toward Gerald's study door like she expected it to burst open at any moment. She dried her hands slowly, then turned to face me. She started to speak. "Honey, I need to tell you about something. Your father has been talking to some people about the house. About Ruth's house. He thinks that maybe—" The study door opened. Gerald appeared in the doorway watching us with that expression he wore when he suspected disloyalty. Diane's entire demeanor changed in an instant. Her voice became bright and artificial. She asked about Eliza's school. She complimented my haircut. She became a different person, the person Gerald required her to be. When I hugged her goodbye at the door, she held on longer than usual. Her arms tightened around me like she was memorizing the feeling. She whispered something into my shoulder. "I am sorry." Just those 2 words. I asked what she meant. She shook her head and pulled away. Her eyes were wet. I thought she was just being emotional. Diane had always been anxious, always apologizing for things that were not her fault. I did not push. I drove home and forgot about it until tonight. Now I understood. She knew. She knew what Gerald was planning, and she tried to warn me, but she could not find the courage to finish the sentence. I sat alone in Ruth's kitchen and began counting. Not the years, the dollars, the sacrifices, the times I said yes when everything inside me screamed no. 3 years ago, Gerald called in a panic. His voice cracked like a teenager's. He had made bad investments. He needed $15,000 immediately or he would lose his house. He swore he would pay me back within 6 months. I emptied my savings account that same afternoon. He never mentioned repayment. I never asked. That was the unspoken rule. Family does not keep score. 2 years ago, Teresa's credit card debt reached $40,000. Shopping addiction, she claimed, a disease she could not control. She said she would lose everything, her credit, her marriage, her children's future. I paid it off in a single transfer to save my sister from bankruptcy. She bought a new Mercedes the following month. 18 months ago, Kevin approached me with a business plan, a landscaping company. He needed $20,000 for equipment. I made him sign a loan agreement, actual paperwork, witnesses, payment schedule. His company failed within 6 months. When I asked about repayment, Gerald called me heartless. The loan became a family gift. The paperwork disappeared from Kevin's files. $80,000 in 3 years. Money I could have saved for Eliza's college. Money I could have used to renovate this house. Money that vanished into my family's pockets and was never acknowledged, never appreciated, never returned. I remembered now that Gerald started asking about Ruth's house value right after Kevin's business loan. Just casual questions. Just curious. He wanted to know what property in this neighborhood was selling for, what the market was doing, whether old houses like Ruth's were worth renovating or better to tear down. I thought he was making conversation. I did not realize he was appraising his inheritance. Eliza had been part of my life for 5 years now. I adopted her 2 years after Marcus died, when she was 3 years old. A foster child with no living relatives. Quiet eyes that had seen too much. I recognized something in her the first time we met. 2 broken people who might make each other whole. When I announced the adoption, Gerald asked why I would want to raise someone else's problem. Those were his exact words. Someone else's problem. Teresa laughed nervously but did not disagree. Diane said nothing at all. Every Christmas since then, Gerald and Diane sent elaborate gifts for Mason and Mia. Matching outfits, expensive toys, cards signed with love for our beloved grandchildren. Eliza received a gift card. $25 to a store she had never visited. Some years they forgot her birthday entirely. On the wall in Gerald's living room, there is a shrine of family photographs. Teresa's wedding, the twins' baptism, Gerald's retirement party. I appear in exactly 2 pictures, both from more than a decade ago. Eliza appears in none. Last Thanksgiving, we gathered at Gerald's house for dinner. Mia asked loudly why Eliza did not look like anyone else in the family. The table went silent. Teresa smiled and answered before I could speak. Because she is not really family, sweetie. She is just living with Aunt Rosalind. Eliza heard everything. She pretended she did not, but she stopped eating after that. She asked to go home early. She did not speak the entire drive back. I found myself standing in Eliza's bedroom, pulling a suitcase from the closet. My hands moved without thinking. I started folding her clothes, preparing to pack, preparing to surrender. The same thing I had done my entire life. Maybe Gerald was right. Maybe I was being selfish. Teresa's twins did need space. I had always been the strong one, the capable one, the one who could handle anything. Maybe handling this meant stepping aside. My phone buzzed on the dresser. A text from Diane. Please do not be angry with me. I had no choice. Your father... The message ended mid-sentence. 3 dots appeared, indicating she was typing more. Then they vanished. Nothing else came. I caught my reflection in Eliza's bedroom mirror. I saw my mother's face looking back at me. The same tired eyes. The same bent posture. The same woman who spent her life apologizing for existing. A small voice came from the doorway. Mommy? Eliza stood there in her star pajamas, the ones Ruth bought her 2 months before she died. She looked at the open suitcase on her bed, at her folded clothes, at my face. She walked slowly toward me. She took my hand the way she did when she was first adopted and afraid of everything, and she asked a question that shattered what was left of my heart. Did I do something wrong? Is that why we have to leave? I could not speak. I could not breathe. I pulled her into my arms and held her while something fundamental shifted inside me. All my life I had bent and accommodated and sacrificed. But this was not about me anymore. This was about what I was teaching my daughter, about what love looked like, about whether belonging required disappearing. After Eliza fell asleep again, I returned to the kitchen table. I picked up Ruth's envelope. My hands were steadier now. Anger had replaced fear. Not loud anger. Quiet anger. The kind that builds instead of burns. I slid my finger under the seal. Inside were several pages of Ruth's careful handwriting. A letter dated 6 months before she died. Before the illness took her strength. Before Gerald started visiting more often. The first line made my breath catch. My dearest girl. If you are reading this letter, it means they have finally made their move. I hoped I was wrong about them, but I have watched your father and sister for 60 years, and I know what they are capable of. Ruth knew, she had always known, and she had left me something to fight back with. I stood in Ruth's bedroom past midnight, surrounded by everything she left behind. The lavender bedspread she loved, her reading glasses still resting on the nightstand. The faint scent of rose water that had not faded even after 3 years. I kept this room exactly as it was the day she died. I told myself it was respect. Maybe it was denial. Maybe I was not ready to let go of the last person who truly loved me. The jewelry box sat on her dresser, carved mahogany with mother-of-pearl inlay. Ruth's husband gave it to her on their 40th anniversary, 2 years before he passed. I had opened this box dozens of times since her death. I held her pearl earrings against my ears. I breathed in the sachet tucked inside the velvet lining. I searched for connection, for comfort, for proof that I had not imagined the warmth she gave me. But I never looked for hidden compartments. I never thought to lift the lining. Ruth was not a secretive woman. She said what she meant, and meant what she said, or so I believed. Her letter changed everything. My fingers pressed along the edges of the bottom panel, searching for what she described. A small space, a hidden key, something Gerald was never meant to find. I felt nothing but smooth wood and worn velvet, until my thumb caught a slight ridge near the back corner. I pressed harder. A soft click. The velvet panel lifted to reveal a shallow compartment underneath. And there, resting on a folded piece of paper, was a small brass key, tarnished with age. No label, no explanation, just metal and mystery waiting for me. I carried the key back to the kitchen and spread Ruth's letter across the table. 3 more pages waited beyond the one I had already read. Her handwriting filled every inch, careful and deliberate, the words of a woman who knew she was running out of time. She began by explaining why she changed her will 5 years ago. It happened after Marcus died, after I was alone with a grief I did not know how to carry. Ruth watched how I handled that darkness. She saw me adopt Eliza without hesitation, without demanding guarantees. She watched me become a mother through choice rather than chance. She wrote about Gerald and Teresa, too, how they only visited when they needed something, how Teresa once threw a tantrum when Ruth refused to co-sign a loan, how Gerald suggested Ruth move to a nursing home so he could rent out her house and collect the income. They saw her as a resource, not a person, an inheritance waiting to happen. I knew then, Ruth wrote, that if I left anything to your father, it would disappear within a year. Teresa would spend it on things she does not need. Gerald would lose it to another failed investment. But you, my darling girl, you would make this house a home. You would plant flowers in my garden. You would raise Eliza in these rooms and remember me with love. One paragraph near the bottom of the page was smudged, the ink blurred by what looked like dried tears. I had to hold the paper up to the light to read it. I am sorry I did not protect you sooner. I watched them treat you like a servant your whole life. I watched them take and take while you gave and gave. And I said nothing. I was afraid of losing my son entirely. I was a coward. Please forgive me. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from crying. Ruth had seen everything. She understood what I never let myself admit. And she carried that guilt to her grave. The second page explained the legal situation. Ruth created her original will with a lawyer named Margaret Chen, an old friend from her church group. That will clearly stated that the house and her savings would go to me. Gerald received nothing, not because Ruth did not love him, but because she had already given him more than his share. But 6 months before Ruth died, Gerald began pressuring her to change everything. He brought his own lawyer to the house. He talked about tax advantages. He talked about family unity. He talked in circles until Ruth did not know which way was up. Ruth wrote that she pretended to be more confused than she actually was. She signed the papers Gerald wanted her to sign because fighting him took energy she no longer had, but she also kept her original will safe with Margaret Chen. She never told Gerald about Margaret. She never mentioned the second copy. I do not know which will would hold up in court, Ruth admitted. I am not a lawyer, I just wanted to give you a fighting chance. If they come for the house, find Margaret. She has everything you need. Then came a passage that made my blood run cold. Your father visited me 4 times in the last month of my life. Teresa came twice. They brought papers every time. They waited until I was exhausted, until the pain medication made my mind cloudy. They asked me to sign things I did not fully understand. I signed because I wanted them to leave. I signed because I was tired of fighting. I signed because dying takes so much energy, there was nothing left for resistance. Gerald had preyed on a dying woman, his own mother. He had waited until she was too weak to defend herself, and then took everything. The third page explained the key. Years ago, Ruth opened a safety deposit box at First Heritage Bank downtown. She never told anyone about it. Not Gerald, not Diane, not even her husband until just before he died. Inside that box, she stored her original will, notarized and witnessed. She stored documentation of every dollar Gerald and Teresa extracted from her over 3 decades. Bank statements, Canceled checks, written IOUs that were never honored. A paper trail of financial exploitation stretching back longer than I had been alive. I kept these records not for revenge, Ruth wrote. I kept them because I knew someday you might need proof. Proof that you were never the selfish one. Proof that you gave everything while they only took. The small brass key opened that safety deposit box. Ruth arranged for me to be listed as co-owner, though I never knew. Margaret Chen had the access documentation. Then Ruth mentioned one more thing. A final gift I did not see coming. I also left something for Eliza. A letter written just for her. And a small inheritance separate from the house. I wanted her to know that she was my granddaughter in every way that matters. Blood is just an accident. Love is a choice. And I chose her the moment I saw how you loved her. I set the letter down because I could not see through my tears. Ruth had thought of everything. Ruth had protected us both. And she had done it all while dying, while Gerald circled her like a vulture waiting for the last breath. The fourth page described the years Ruth spent watching Gerald become someone she did not recognize. She traced it back to his childhood, to patterns she should have broken but did not. She blamed herself for his cruelty. She blamed herself for Teresa's greed. She blamed herself for creating a family that fed on its weakest members. Near the end, Ruth mentioned catching Gerald in her office late one night. She pretended to be asleep as he rifled through her desk, her filing cabinet, the places he thought she might hide important documents. He did not find what he was looking for. She had already moved everything. The final page contained practical information. Margaret Chen's name and address. An office on Congress Avenue in downtown Austin. A phone number. Office hours. Beneath the contact details, Ruth added a warning in underlined text. Do not tell anyone in the family about Margaret. Not your mother. Not anyone. They cannot know. I read that line 3 times. Not your mother. Ruth specifically excluded Diane, which meant Ruth knew my mother could not be trusted. Diane would tell Gerald. Diane would compromise everything. I thought about my mother's incomplete text message, the apology without explanation, the silence that followed. Diane was not innocent. She might not be the architect of this betrayal, but she was complicit. She had chosen Gerald over me, just like she always did. The kitchen clock read 2:14 in the morning. In a few hours, Eliza would wake up asking questions I still could not answer. But now I had a path forward. I had Margaret Chen's name. I had a key to a safety deposit box. I had proof that my grandmother loved me enough to fight from beyond the grave. I would call Margaret tomorrow. I would learn exactly what Ruth left behind. I would understand my options before Gerald could make another move. My phone lit up on the counter. A text from Teresa, sent at this ungodly hour. I know you are upset. Let us talk tomorrow, just us sisters. I will come by at noon. We can work something out. She had ended the message with a heart emoji. Teresa had never sent me a heart emoji in 35 years. She never offered to talk things out. She never suggested compromise. Everything about this message felt wrong. She wanted something. She knew something. Or she was trying to find out what I knew. I turned off my phone and pressed Ruth's key against my palm. Tomorrow, everything would change. I just had to survive until then. I drove through downtown Austin with my hands tight on the steering wheel, watching the clock on my dashboard count down the minutes I did not have. 9:15 in the morning. Teresa was coming to the house at noon. That gave me 2 hours and 45 minutes to find Margaret Chen, understand what Ruth left behind, and get back before my sister could discover I was gone. The city looked different through the windshield. Glass towers had replaced the small shops I remembered from childhood. Coffee places charged $8 for drinks I could make at home. Austin had grown up while I was busy surviving, and I barely recognized the streets anymore. Margaret Chen's office was in an older building on Congress Avenue, red brick with white trim, wedged between a modern high-rise and a taco restaurant. It was the kind of building that refused to sell, refused to change, refused to disappear no matter how much money developers offered. I liked it immediately. It reminded me of Ruth. The brass key pressed against my hip through my pocket. I had not let it out of my sight since finding it in the jewelry box. It felt like carrying a piece of Ruth herself, a talisman against the family that wanted to erase us both. I climbed narrow stairs to the second floor. The hallway smelled like old books and lemon polish. A frosted glass door read, "Margaret Chen, attorney at law," in gold lettering that had faded but not peeled. I knocked twice and waited. The woman who opened the door was in her late 60s, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. She wore a burgundy cardigan over a crisp white blouse. She looked like someone's grandmother. She also looked like someone who had won a lot of fights. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You look just like her," she said. "Ruth talked about you constantly. Please come in." Her office was lined with bookshelves, every wall covered in legal volumes and framed photographs. I spotted Ruth in one picture, younger than I ever knew her, laughing at some long-ago church picnic. Margaret and Ruth stood arm in arm like sisters who had chosen each other. Margaret explained that she and Ruth were friends for over 40 years. They met at First Methodist when their children were young. Ruth was the maid of honor at Margaret's second wedding. Margaret was the first person Ruth called after her stroke. "I visited her every week at the end," Margaret said, her voice catching. "She told me things she could not tell anyone else. She was afraid, Rosalind. Not of dying. She was ready for that. She was afraid of what would happen to you after she was gone." Margaret retrieved a thick folder from her filing cabinet and spread its contents across her desk. The tab read, "Ruth Morrison Estate." Inside, documents were organized with colored tabs and sticky notes, each one a piece of a puzzle Ruth assembled over years. She slid a paper toward me. "This is your grandmother's original will," she said, "dated 5 years ago." Ruth's signature was strong and clear at the bottom. The witnesses were legible. The notary stamp was crisp. According to this document, the house and all savings went to me. Then Margaret produced another paper. This one was dated 8 months ago, just weeks before Ruth died. The handwriting on the signature line was shaky, almost unreadable. This version left everything to Gerald, with instructions that he distribute assets as he saw fit. Margaret explained the problem. Both wills were technically signed by Ruth. Both had witnesses. Gerald's version was filed with probate court. Margaret's version never made it to the courthouse because Ruth died before they could complete the process. "But I have documentation," Margaret continued. "Medical records show Ruth was on heavy pain medication when the second will was signed. Her home nurse was asked to leave the room when Gerald brought his lawyer. And Ruth gave me a written statement describing the pressure she faced. Then Margaret told me something that made my stomach turn. Ruth said your father brought the new will to her hospital bed. She was barely conscious. He told her if she did not sign, he would make sure you never saw Eliza's adoption finalized. He threatened your daughter to manipulate a dying woman." I gripped the armrest of my chair until my knuckles went white. Gerald had used Eliza as leverage. He had threatened to destroy my family to get what he wanted from his own mother. Margaret leaned back and removed her glasses. She told me the hard truth about challenging Gerald's will in court. It would take 12 to 18 months minimum. Appeals could stretch it to 3 years. Legal fees would run between $30,000 and $50,000. I would need expert witnesses, court costs, depositions where Gerald's lawyer would try to make me look like a greedy troublemaker. And even if I won, Margaret said quietly, the family would be destroyed. Relationships would burn. The victory might feel hollow. She revealed something else. Gerald was not just greedy. He was desperate. Your father took out a second mortgage on his own home 2 years ago. He used the money to cover Teresa's debts and Kevin's failed business. He is underwater by at least $150,000. If he cannot sell Ruth's house quickly, he may lose everything. That explained the urgency, the realtor in my backyard, the timeline that could not wait. Gerald was drowning, and he planned to use my inheritance as a life raft. Margaret asked me to show her the key I found in Ruth's jewelry box. I placed it on her desk, and she picked it up with something like reverence. First Heritage Bank, she confirmed. Downtown branch. Box number 417. You are listed as co-owner. Ruth arranged it years ago, just in case. She described what the box contained. The original will, notarized and witnessed. Financial records documenting every dollar Gerald and Teresa extracted from Ruth over 3 decades. Bank statements, canceled checks, written IOUs that were never honored. Ruth kept meticulous records of every loan that became a gift, every promise that was broken. These records might not hold up in court as standalone evidence, Margaret admitted, but they paint a picture, a pattern. If Gerald claims Ruth left everything to him out of love and gratitude, these documents tell a very different story. Then Margaret mentioned the final item in the box. Ruth left a sealed envelope for Eliza. She wanted your daughter to know she was loved, that she belonged. Ruth called Eliza her true grandchild. She said blood was just an accident, but love was a choice. I sat in silence, trying to process everything. Years of legal battle, tens of thousands of dollars. My family torn apart in public courtrooms, all to recover a house that should have been mine without question. Margaret let the silence stretch. Then she asked a question that cut through everything. What do you actually want? Do you want the house? Do you want justice? Do you want your family to admit what they did? Because those are 3 different things, and they require 3 different strategies. I thought about Eliza, about the chalk drawing destroyed under scooter wheels, about my daughter asking if she did something wrong. I did not need Gerald to apologize. I did not need Teresa to admit anything. I needed Eliza to grow up knowing she belonged somewhere. I needed a home no one could take from us. Margaret nodded as if she expected that answer. Then you do not need to win the war, she said. You need to change the battlefield. She glanced out her window toward the street below, and her expression shifted. She asked a question that seemed casual but felt deliberate. By the way, do you know the house next door to Ruth's is for sale? The Evelyn Porter property? I shook my head. I knew Evelyn. She was Ruth's neighbor for 30 years. Her husband died last year. But I did not know she was selling, Margaret explained. Evelyn wanted to move closer to her children in Seattle. The house was listed reasonably, priced to sell quickly rather than maximize profit. It was a 3-bedroom craftsman with a garden almost as beautiful as Ruth's. I know Evelyn, Margaret said. We attend the same church. Ruth introduced us years ago. Evelyn adored your grandmother. She despised your father. When Gerald approached her about buying the house, she refused to even let him inside. The idea took shape before Margaret finished speaking. If I bought Evelyn's house, I would have a home that no one could take from me. I could watch Gerald sell Ruth's property to pay his debts. I could be right next door, living well, raising my daughter in peace. Not revenge, just freedom. Margaret leaned forward, her voice dropping. There is a catch. Evelyn has another interested buyer. Someone from California with cash. She is deciding this week. If you want that house, you need to move fast. She placed a business card on the desk. Evelyn Porter. A phone number. Call her tonight, Margaret said. Tell her Ruth sent you. That will mean something. I picked up the card, my mind racing through finances, mortgages, possibilities. This was not retreat. This was repositioning. Before you decide anything, Margaret added, go to the bank. Open that safety deposit box. Ruth wanted you to see everything. I think once you do, your path will become clear. I stood to leave, tucking the card and the key into my purse. At the door, I turned back. Margaret smiled, and for a moment she looked like Ruth. Your grandmother would be proud of you, she said. Whatever you choose. I sat in my car outside First Heritage Bank with the engine still running, watching the clock on my dashboard tick toward disaster. 11:20 in the morning. Teresa would arrive at the house at noon. That gave me 40 minutes to uncover whatever Ruth left behind and figure out what to do with it. Every instinct told me to postpone this. Wait for a day when I had more time. Come back when Teresa was not circling like a vulture. But something deeper told me that waiting was exactly what Gerald wanted. Every hour I delayed was another hour he could scheme, manipulate, prepare his next move. Ruth had waited too long. I would not make the same mistake. The bank was Old Austin, limestone facade and brass fixtures, the kind of place where tellers still knew customers by name. I pushed through the heavy glass doors, clutching my purse with the key inside. The lobby smelled like polished marble and old money. A security guard nodded politely. 2 elderly women chatted near the water fountain. A young man in a suit reviewed paperwork at a desk. Everything felt normal, ordinary. No one knew that I was about to open a box that could change my life. My heart pounded against my ribs. My palms were damp. I reminded myself to breathe. Ruth wanted me to find this. Ruth prepared for this moment. I was not trespassing. I was claiming my inheritance. I approached the customer service desk and explained that I needed to access safety deposit box 417. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Patricia. She asked for identification, typed something into her computer, frowned slightly, then looked up with surprise. She confirmed that Rosalind Morrison was listed as co-owner of Box 417. The account was established 6 years ago. The primary holder was Ruth Morrison, deceased. "I remember Mrs. Morrison," Patricia said softly. "She came in every few months to add something to her box, always dressed nicely, always asked about my grandchildren." Her voice caught. I was sorry to hear she passed. Patricia led me through a security door and down a hallway lined with framed photographs of Austin's history. We stopped at a vault entrance. She entered a code, and the heavy door swung open with a sound like a sigh. Rows of metal boxes lined every wall, small ones near the ceiling, larger ones at floor level. Patricia guided me to Section 4, Row 17, a medium-sized box at chest height. She inserted her key, waited for me to insert mine, and turned them simultaneously. As she prepared to leave me alone, Patricia hesitated at the door. She looked back with an expression I could not quite read. "Mrs. Morrison asked me to tell you something," she said, "if you ever came. She said to tell you not to cry, tell her to fight." Those were her exact words. Then Patricia was gone, and I was alone with whatever Ruth had hidden. My hands trembled as I slid the metal drawer from the wall. It was heavier than I expected. I carried it to a private viewing table in the corner, fluorescent lights humming overhead. The room smelled like metal and secrets. Inside the box, documents were arranged in neat stacks, each secured with a rubber band. Ruth's handwriting labeled every bundle: Will original, Gerald loans, Teresa debts, Kevin business, and at the bottom a cream-colored envelope with a single word written in Ruth's careful script: Eliza. Ruth had not just collected evidence, she had built a case. Every document was dated, every amount was noted. Every broken promise was recorded. This was not paranoia. This was protection. This was a grandmother who knew her family would come for her granddaughter, and she spent her dying months making sure I would have weapons to fight back. I pressed my hand against the cold table to steady myself. Tucked beneath the first stack, I found a photograph. Ruth and me at my college graduation, both of us smiling, her arm around my shoulders. I turned it over. On the back, in Ruth's handwriting, "My proudest day, my best girl. Never forget what you are worth." I opened the bundle labeled Gerald Loans. Inside were bank statements going back 15 years. Highlighted lines showed transfer after transfer from Ruth's account to Gerald's. $10,000 here, $5,000 there, $20,000 in a single month. A handwritten summary page listed the cumulative total: $87,000 over 15 years. Not one payment was ever returned. Each loan had a corresponding note from Ruth describing Gerald's promise to repay as soon as business picks up. Teresa's bundle was even thicker. Credit card statements listing Ruth as guarantor, a forged signature on a car loan application, evidence of a store account opened in Ruth's name without her knowledge. Ruth documented the moment she discovered Teresa's identity theft. A collection agency had contacted her about a debt she never incurred. Ruth paid it quietly to protect her credit. Teresa never apologized. Teresa never even knew Ruth found out. Among Teresa's documents, I found a printed email that made my stomach drop. Teresa had written to Kevin 2 years ago. Mom's savings should be around $200,000. Once she is gone, we split it 3 ways, but tell Gerald he gets the house. That shuts him up and we get the cash. My sister had been planning Ruth's death like a business transaction, dividing the spoils before the body was cold. Kevin's bundle contained something worse than greed. His landscaping company was never real. There were no employees, no equipment purchases, no actual contracts. Kevin created a fake business, took Ruth's $20,000 investment, and funneled the money directly into his personal account. He filed for bankruptcy within months, which legally absolved him of repaying the business loan. Meanwhile, the money bought a boat. Ruth had hired a private investigator. The documents included a full report, bank records, photographs of the boat, registered under Kevin's mother's name to hide it from creditors. The entire scheme documented in devastating detail. A note from Ruth explained her reasoning. I considered pressing charges, but it would have destroyed Teresa's marriage, and despite everything, she is still my granddaughter. I chose to protect the family. I chose wrong. By the time I understood that, I was too sick to fight. The final page in Kevin's file was a printout from a legal website, How to Report Investment Fraud to the Texas Attorney General. Ruth had bookmarked it but never submitted a report. She saved the instructions, just in case I needed them. I carefully removed the document labeled Will Original. It was identical to the copy Margaret showed me. Ruth's signature was strong and clear. The witness signatures were legible. The notary stamp was crisp. This was the true record of Ruth's wishes. The language was simple. I leave my home at 47 Magnolia Lane, Austin, Texas, to my granddaughter Rosalind Morrison. I leave my savings account to be divided equally between Rosalind Morrison and her daughter, Eliza Morrison. I leave nothing to my son Gerald Morrison or my granddaughter Teresa Morrison, as they have already received more than their share during my lifetime. A separate note accompanied the will. I know this seems harsh, but I have given Gerald and Teresa hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. They spent it all and asked for more. Rosalind never asked for anything. She only gave. This is my way of balancing the scales. The final line made me smile despite everything. If they contest this will, show them the evidence. Let them explain to a judge why they deserve more from a woman they treated like an ATM. I suspect they will not enjoy that conversation. I saved Eliza's envelope for last. The paper was thick, cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges. Whatever Ruth wrote to my daughter was private, sacred. But Ruth left it here for me to find. She wanted me to see. Inside was a single page of handwriting and a small velvet pouch. My darling girl, Ruth wrote, we share no blood, but we share something better. We share your mother. She chose you. She fought for you. She loves you more than anyone has ever loved anyone. That makes you family. That makes you mine. Never let anyone tell you that you do not belong. You belong everywhere your mother takes you. You belong in her heart, which means you belong in mine. I opened the velvet pouch with shaking fingers. Inside was a small gold locket. I pressed the clasp, and it opened to reveal 2 photographs. Ruth as a young woman on one side, Eliza at 5 years old on the other, grinning with her missing front teeth. For the first time since this nightmare began, I cried. Not from grief, from love. I checked my phone. 11:58. Teresa would be at the house in 2 minutes. I could not possibly make it back in time. But maybe that was okay. Maybe showing up to an empty house would send a message. Silence as the first act of resistance. My phone buzzed with texts. Teresa first. Where are you? We waited for an hour. This is so typical of you. Then Gerald. Answer your sister. We need to discuss the timeline. The realtor wants to photograph the house tomorrow. Be there at 9. This is not a request. I did not reply. I placed the documents back in the safety deposit box, keeping only Ruth's will, the graduation photograph, and Eliza's envelope. Evidence I would need. Memories I would cherish. As I locked the box and slipped the key back into my purse, my phone rang. Not Teresa. Not Gerald. An unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice came through, warm but serious. Is this Rosalind Morrison? This is Evelyn Porter. Margaret Chen said you might be calling, but I wanted to reach you first. Can we meet today? There is something about your grandmother you need to know. I walked out of the bank into the bright Austin sun. I had evidence. I had options. I had allies I did not know existed. And somewhere, Ruth was watching. I stood on the sidewalk outside First Heritage Bank with my phone pressed to my ear, listening to a woman I had never met ask me to trust her. The midday sun beat down on my shoulders. Traffic hummed past on Congress Avenue. And Evelyn Porter, Ruth's neighbor of 30 years, was telling me there were things I needed to understand before making any decisions about my future. Her voice was warm but serious, the voice of someone who had lived long enough to stop wasting time on pleasantries. She said Ruth talked about me constantly in those final years. She said Ruth made her promise things. She said my grandmother would have wanted us to talk. I asked where she wanted to meet. My house, Evelyn replied. The one next door to Ruth's. The one that is for sale. I will make tea. I have photographs. And I have something Ruth wanted you to have. I agreed without hesitation. 20 minutes. I would be there. The drive to Magnolia Lane felt different this time. I was not going home to pack boxes or surrender territory. I was going to meet an ally I did not know I had. Evelyn's house was a craftsman bungalow with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, sitting right next to Ruth's property. A for sale sign stood in the front yard, the same sign that had been there for weeks without me paying attention. I had been so focused on my own crisis that I never wondered who was selling or why. Ruth's house looked different from this angle, smaller somehow. The oak tree in the backyard stretched its branches over both properties, connecting them like old friends holding hands. The door opened before I could knock. Evelyn Porter was 72 years old, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing gardening gloves and a flour-dusted apron. She looked like she had been interrupted mid-task and did not mind at all. You have Ruth's eyes, she said immediately. She always told me you were the only one who looked at her the way she deserved to be looked at. Come in. I just pulled scones from the oven. Her home was warm and cluttered in the best way. Books stacked on every surface. Plants crowding the windowsills. Photographs covering an entire wall. A life fully lived, displayed without apology. As I stepped inside, a framed photograph on the entryway table caught my attention. Ruth and Evelyn, maybe 20 years younger, standing arm in arm in front of Ruth's oak tree. Behind them, barely visible in the background, stood Gerald. He was looking at the camera with an expression I could not quite name. Hunger, maybe, or calculation. Even then, he was measuring what he might take. Evelyn led me to a sunny kitchen with yellow curtains and herbs growing in mason jars on the windowsill. She poured tea into mismatched cups and slid a plate of warm scones across the table. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had hosted 1,000 difficult conversations. She told me how she and Ruth became close after Ruth's husband died. 2 widows on the same street, both with families who visited less than they should. They had tea every Sunday. They watched each other's houses. They shared secrets they could not tell anyone else. Your grandmother was afraid, Evelyn said bluntly. Not of dying. She was ready for that. She was afraid of what Gerald would do to you once she was gone. She saw how he treated you, how Teresa treated you. She spent her last years trying to protect you from beyond the grave. I asked why Ruth never said anything directly, why she never confronted Gerald, why she allowed them to take advantage of her for so long. Evelyn sighed. Because Ruth believed in family, even when family did not believe in her. She kept hoping Gerald would change, that Teresa would grow up. She waited too long. Her voice hardened, but she stopped waiting before she died. That is why she came to me. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. Ruth asked me to do something for her, a favor. She asked me to sell my house to you, if you ever needed it. She made me promise. I set down my teacup too hard. tea splashed onto the tablecloth. Evelyn simply handed me a napkin and continued. 6 months before she died, Ruth came to Evelyn with a plan. She knew Gerald would try to take her house. She knew the legal battle would be ugly. She wanted me to have an escape route, a home Gerald could never touch. Ruth gave Evelyn $20,000 as a deposit. She asked Evelyn to hold the house off the market until I was ready. If I never needed it, Evelyn would keep the deposit and sell to someone else. But if I came asking, Evelyn would sell to me first, at a fair price. "I have been waiting," Evelyn said. "When Margaret called this morning, I knew. Ruth was right. You need this house, and I need to keep my promise." She quoted the price. It was below market value. Generous, almost suspiciously so. I started to protest, but Evelyn waved me off. "Ruth's deposit covers the difference. She wanted you to have this. She wanted you to have choices." Then Evelyn pulled an envelope from her apron pocket. "Ruth also asked me to give you this. She wrote it the week before she passed. She said you would know when to open it." I took the envelope with careful hands. Ruth's handwriting on the front read, "For Rosalind, when the path becomes clear." I did not open it. Some things deserved ceremony. Deserved the right moment. I would read it tonight, when the house was quiet and Ruth's words could fill the silence. I asked about the California buyer Margaret mentioned, the cash offer that created such urgency. Evelyn laughed, and it was not a kind sound. "There is no California buyer," she admitted. "I invented him." Margaret helped me spread the rumor. We needed to create urgency. We needed you to act before Gerald could interfere. She explained what happened 2 months ago. Gerald showed up at her door unannounced with a real estate agent. He offered to buy her house. He said he wanted to expand Ruth's property. He said he would give her a fair price. Evelyn refused. "I told him I would rather burn this house to the ground than sell it to him," she said calmly. He did not take it well. He called me a bitter old woman. He said I would regret disrespecting the Morrison family. Gerald came back a week later, alone this time. He stood on Evelyn's porch and warned her she was making a mistake, that she did not understand who she was dealing with, that he had friends who could make her life difficult. "Your father is not just greedy," Evelyn said, her eyes meeting mine. "He is desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things. Ruth knew that. That is why she planned so carefully. That is why you need to move quickly." I ran the numbers in my head, my savings, my income, my credit score. A mortgage was possible, tight but possible. I would have to cut expenses, cancel streaming services, cook more meals at home, but I could do it. Evelyn sensed my calculation. She offered terms, a 30-day close, flexible on the exact date. She would leave most of the furniture if I wanted it. She just needed time to ship her personal belongings to Seattle, where her children lived. I thought about what this meant. If I bought Evelyn's house, I had a home Gerald could not touch. I could let him sell Ruth's house and pay off his debts. I could let him think he won. And I would be right next door watching, thriving, building a life on land he tried to steal from me. This was not retreat. This was repositioning. More importantly, Eliza would have stability. A home with a yard. A neighborhood where people like Evelyn watched out for each other. A place that belonged to us, free and clear. Evelyn added something quietly. "Ruth told me about your daughter. She showed me pictures. She said Eliza reminded her of you at that age. Quiet, brave, trying so hard to be invisible so she would not be a burden." Evelyn reached across the table and took my hand. "Buy this house. Let that little girl learn she does not have to disappear." I looked around the kitchen. The yellow curtains, the herb garden, the photographs of a life well lived. This could be my kitchen, my life, my fresh start. I looked at Evelyn and said the words that changed everything. "I want to buy your house." Her smile transformed her face, made her look 20 years younger. "Good," she said. "Ruth would be so proud. Now let us talk about closing dates, and let us discuss how we are going to handle your father." Before we could begin, my phone erupted. Text after text flooding the screen, all from Teresa. "Where are you?" "Dad is furious. We waited for an hour." This is so typical. You always have to make everything difficult. Then Gerald, "Your sister told me you were not home. We need to discuss the timeline. The realtor wants to photograph the house tomorrow. Be there at 9 in the morning. This is not a request." Then one final message. From Diane, my mother, who had been silent since her incomplete apology. "I know you found Ruth's letter. I know you went to the bank. Please, sweetheart, do not do anything rash. Your father has a plan. Just trust him. Trust us. It will all work out." I read my mother's words 3 times. Diane knew about the bank. Diane knew about Ruth's letter, which meant Gerald knew, which meant they had been watching my movements, tracking me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I turned off my phone. I looked at Evelyn. How fast can we close? Through the kitchen window I could see Ruth's house. My house. The house they wanted to steal. But here, in this warm kitchen, surrounded by the smell of scones and the memory of a grandmother who loved me enough to plan for my survival, I was building something they would never see coming. 3 weeks of pretending nearly broke me. Every morning I moved through Ruth's house with cardboard boxes and packing tape, playing the role of a woman preparing to surrender. I wrapped dishes in newspaper. I folded linens into storage bins. I labeled everything with a black marker in clear, defeated handwriting. Anyone watching would see a daughter who had finally accepted her place. None of it was real. The boxes were mostly empty. The labels meant nothing. I was performing compliance for an audience that checked on me constantly, waiting for any sign of rebellion. Every afternoon while Gerald believed I was packing, I drove to Margaret Chen's office downtown. We reviewed loan documents. We completed title searches. We scheduled home inspections. The machinery of property transfer churned quietly, invisibly, beyond my family's awareness. Margaret handled every detail with the precision of someone who had been waiting years for this moment. Evelyn played her part perfectly. The for sale sign remained in her yard, maintaining the illusion of an open market. She told curious neighbors she was reviewing offers, taking her time, considering her options. No one suspected that the buyer had been chosen months ago by a dead woman who refused to let her granddaughter lose everything. I had never been good at deception. I was raised to be transparent, accommodating, honest to the point of self-destruction. But I was learning. Ruth taught me from beyond the grave that sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon. Sometimes the best revenge is letting your enemies believe they have already won. Gerald came to Ruth's house every 3 days. He walked through the rooms like a landlord inspecting a rental property, checking windows, opening closets, counting the boxes I had packed. He measured my obedience in cardboard and tape. He never asked how I was feeling. He never mentioned Eliza. He talked about the realtor, the listing price, the potential buyers he expected to line up once the photographs were posted. He spoke as if I had already disappeared, as if I was a ghost haunting my own home. He started calling the garage apartment your new place. He mentioned improvements he was considering, a fresh coat of paint, maybe a small refrigerator, as if these gestures made up for stealing my inheritance. I nodded at everything. I agreed with everything. I thanked him for his consideration while each word tasted like ash on my tongue. 3 more weeks. I just needed to survive 3 more weeks. During his latest visit, Gerald paused in Ruth's bedroom doorway. He stared at the dresser where Ruth kept her jewelry box. His eyes narrowed with something that looked like suspicion. "Did you find anything interesting in there?" he asked, too casually. "Any old papers? Documents? Things Mother might have hidden?" I shook my head and kept my face blank. I did not mention the key. I did not mention Margaret. I did not mention the safety deposit box full of evidence that could destroy him. Gerald watched me for a long moment, searching for cracks in my performance. Then he moved on, apparently satisfied. Teresa adopted a new strategy during those 3 weeks. Sweetness. She brought coffee from my favorite shop. She offered to help pack. She reminisced about childhood memories she had carefully edited to remove every cruelty. "Remember when we used to play in this backyard?" she asked one afternoon, folding a towel she had no intention of keeping. "We were so close back then." I do not know what happened to us. I remembered exactly what happened. Teresa happened. But I said nothing. The twins accompanied her on these visits. Mason and Mia ran through the house, claiming rooms like conquering armies. "This will be my bedroom," Mason announced, standing in Eliza's doorway. "Mommy said so." Eliza was at school. She did not hear her cousin claiming her space. I heard everything. Toward the end of one visit, Teresa asked about Ruth's important papers. She framed it as concern. Gerald had mentioned that Ruth might have left financial documents lying around. Teresa wanted to help sort through them. Her eyes kept drifting toward Ruth's office door while she spoke. I told her I had not found anything interesting, just old receipts and birthday cards, nothing worth keeping. Later, while loading boxes into her car, Teresa called Kevin on her phone. She thought I was inside. She thought I could not hear. "She has not found anything," Teresa said. "Either Ruth hid it better than we thought, or it does not exist. Either way, we are clear once the house sells." Kevin's response was muffled through the phone. Teresa laughed. "I know," she said. Finally. I stood frozen behind the screen door, listening to my sister celebrate her victory over a dead woman who had loved her despite everything. Eliza changed during those 3 weeks. The transformation was gradual enough that I almost missed it. She spoke less, drew less, smiled less. She came home from school and went straight to her room. She no longer asked to play in the backyard. Since the day Mason destroyed her chalk drawing, Eliza had not touched her art supplies. The colorful box sat untouched on her desk. When I suggested we draw together, she said she did not feel like it. Her voice was flat, rehearsed, the voice of a child learning to want nothing. 3 times that week, Eliza woke up crying from nightmares she could not explain. She just dreamed about moving, she said, about boxes, about a small room where she could not find me. Her teacher sent an email expressing concern. Eliza had been unusually quiet in class. She no longer volunteered answers. She sat alone at lunch. Something had changed at home, the teacher guessed. Was there anything she should know? One evening I found Eliza sitting on the floor of her closet, knees pulled to her chest, making herself as small as possible. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" I asked. Eliza looked up at me with hollow eyes. "Practicing," she said. "The new room is small. I am practicing being small." Those words shattered something inside me that I did not know was still intact. My daughter was rehearsing her own disappearance, learning to need less space so others could take more. Diane arrived alone on a Tuesday afternoon. No Gerald, no Teresa. She stood on the porch clutching her purse with both hands, looking like she might bolt at any moment. She said she came to explain. She knew I was angry. She said there were things I did not understand. Complications, pressures, debts. Gerald was in serious trouble, she explained. Selling Ruth's house was the only way out. If I could just cooperate, if I could just do this one thing for the family, everything would be over. Gerald would leave me alone. Teresa would stop. She trailed off without finishing that sentence. Stop what? I wondered. Being Teresa? I let my mother talk without interrupting. I watched her hands tremble. I watched guilt flicker across her face. I watched the woman who was supposed to protect me make excuses for the man who was destroying me. Before leaving, Diane grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Your father is not a patient man," she whispered. "He has already made calls. To his lawyer, to people at the county office. If you are planning something, Rosalind, be careful. He will find out. He always finds out." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Thank you for the warning," I said. "Tell Dad I will have the house ready for photographs next week." Diane searched my face for something. Truth, maybe. Surrender. She found neither. 2 days before Gerald's scheduled photography session, Margaret called to confirm that all paperwork was complete. The mortgage was approved, the title was clear. Evelyn had signed everything on her end. I took a half day from work, telling my boss I had a doctor's appointment. I drove to a title company office in a strip mall far from Magnolia Lane, where no one would recognize my car. Margaret was waiting. Evelyn was waiting. A stack of documents was waiting. I signed my name 47 times. Each signature felt like a declaration of independence. Each page turned was a wall built between my past and my future. When it was done, Evelyn embraced me for a long moment. "Ruth would be dancing right now," she said. "She always believed you were the strong one. She just wished you knew it too." Evelyn pressed a set of keys into my palm. The keys to the blue-shuttered Craftsman. The keys to freedom. I closed my fingers around them and felt, for the first time in weeks, like I could breathe. As we left the title office, Margaret mentioned something she discovered during the property search. "Did you know your father tried to put a lien on Ruth's house 3 years ago? He claimed Ruth owed him money for home repairs he never made. Ruth fought it. She won. But she never told you." Another secret. Another layer of betrayal. Another reminder that I had spent my entire life trusting people who did not deserve it. That night, after Eliza fell asleep, I walked through Ruth's house one final time. I touched the walls she touched. I stood in the kitchen where she taught me to make biscuits. I sat in the chair where she read me stories. I allowed myself to grieve, not the house itself, but what it represented. The last physical connection to someone who loved me without conditions. I retrieved the envelope Evelyn gave me. The one Ruth wrote the week before she died. I opened it slowly, treating the paper like scripture. "My darling girl," Ruth wrote, "if you are reading this, you have found your courage. You have chosen yourself. You have chosen Eliza. I am so proud of you. Now go live. Live loudly. Live fully. Live in a way that makes them choke on their regret." Morning came faster than I expected. I woke to sunlight streaming through Ruth's curtains. Today was the day Gerald's photographer was supposed to come. Today was the day the listing was supposed to go live. But when I looked out the window, something had changed. Evelyn's for sale sign was gone. In its place stood a new sign, red letters on white background, one word that would change everything: sold. A car door slammed outside, then another. Through the window, I watched Gerald's sedan park crookedly at the curb. He stepped out and froze, staring at Evelyn's yard. His face cycled through confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked like fear. Teresa appeared beside him, phone in hand, frantically searching for answers. "What the hell?" she said. "Who bought it? The listing was not even active yet." I took a deep breath. I picked up both sets of keys, mine and Evelyn's. I walked toward the front door. It was time to stop hiding. I stepped onto the porch. Gerald looked up. Our eyes met across the lawn. And I smiled. Gerald stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the sold sign in Evelyn's yard like it was written in a language he did not understand. Teresa clutched her phone beside him, mouth hanging open, scrolling frantically for answers that did not exist. The photographer they hired waited awkwardly by Gerald's car, sensing he had walked into something volatile and wishing he had stayed home. Morning light warmed my face as I stood on Ruth's front porch, watching my family confront a reality they never imagined. Birds sang in the oak tree overhead, oblivious to the human drama unfolding below. A neighbor walked past with her dog, glanced at the strange tableau and hurried on. Gerald forced a laugh. He shook his head like he was dismissing a bad joke. "Some California investor, probably," he said. "Someone with more money than sense. Nothing to do with us. Nothing to change." He straightened his jacket and composed his face into something resembling authority. "Well," he announced, "looks like someone beat us to the Porter place. No matter, we focus on this house. Let us get the photographer started." I did not move from the porch. I held my keys in plain sight. Both sets, the old ones to Ruth's house, and the new ones to Evelyn's. I waited for him to understand. Teresa was faster than Gerald. She saw the keys in my hand. She saw the calm on my face. She saw the way I was looking at Evelyn's house, not with curiosity, but with ownership. You, she breathed. Her voice rose with each word until she was nearly shrieking. You bought it. You bought the house next door. How? How did you even know it was for sale? Gerald shook his head, refusing to believe. That is ridiculous. Rosalind does not have that kind of money. She cannot even afford to fix her own car. He turned to me with that condescending smile he always wore when dismissing my opinions. Tell your sister to stop making things up. I bought Evelyn's house 3 days ago, I said. My voice was steady, calm. The voice of someone who had rehearsed this moment in the mirror. The closing was Tuesday. I move in next week. Gerald's face transformed in stages. Confusion became disbelief. Disbelief became fury. Fury became something darker, something I had never seen directed at me so openly. The mask he wore for 62 years cracked and fell away. The photographer quietly gathered his equipment and retreated to his car. He did not ask for payment. He did not say goodbye. He recognized the look on Gerald's face, the look of a man about to lose control. Gerald walked toward the porch with slow, deliberate steps. His hands were clenched at his sides. A vein pulsed in his temple. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at me like I was a stranger who had broken into his life. He called me ungrateful, selfish, a traitor to my own blood. He reminded me of everything he claimed to have done for me. The roof over my head, the education he supposedly funded, the opportunities he imagined he had provided. I only wanted what was best for everyone, he insisted. Teresa's twins need space. The family needs stability. You were supposed to be reasonable. You were supposed to understand your place. My place, I repeated. You mean the garage apartment? The 200-square-foot box where you wanted me to raise my daughter while my sister's children played in my yard? It is not your yard, Gerald snapped. His composure shattered. It is my yard. This is my house. Mother left everything to me. You have no claim here. You never did. I tilted my head and looked at my father with new eyes. Funny, I said. That is not what Grandma Ruth's original will says. The one you tried to hide. The one your lawyer helped you replace when she was too sick to fight back. Gerald went silent. The color drained from his face. For the first time in my memory, my father had no words. Teresa stepped forward to fill the vacuum. If Gerald's weapon was intimidation, hers was cruelty. She laughed, high and sharp. She said I had always been jealous, always been difficult, always tried to make myself more important than I deserved. She said Ruth probably felt sorry for me. Pity, she sneered, is not the same as love. Then she went further. She mentioned Eliza. Poor Eliza, Teresa said. Stuck with a mother who cannot even hold on to a husband. Stuck in a family that never wanted her. Let us be honest, that child is not even a real Morrison. She is just some orphan you collected to fill the hole Marcus left behind. The screen door creaked behind me. I turned to find Eliza standing there in her pajamas, hair tangled from sleep. She had heard the yelling. She had come to find me. And she had heard everything. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide. She looked at Teresa, then at me, then at the ground. I am sorry, Mommy, she whispered. I did not mean to listen. I just got scared. Her voice cracked. Is it true? Am I not real family? Something broke inside me. Not the breaking of defeat, the breaking of chains. I turned to Eliza first. I knelt down and took her hands in mine. I spoke clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. You are the most real thing in my life, I said. You are my daughter, Ruth's great-granddaughter. You belong to me and I belong to you. Nothing anyone says can change that. Do you understand? Eliza nodded slowly. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not look away. She held onto my hands like they were the only solid thing in a spinning world. I stood, keeping Eliza close, and faced my family. My father. My sister. The people who were supposed to love me. The people who taught me that love came with conditions and price tags. I spent 35 years trying to earn a place in this family, I said. I gave you money you never repaid. I forgave insults you never apologized for. I watched you treat my daughter like a stray dog, and I said nothing because I wanted peace. I wanted belonging. I paused and let the words land. I am done wanting. Kevin muttered something to Teresa. He thought I could not hear. I told you we should have moved faster, he said. Now we are stuck with the debt and no way to pay it off. Teresa hissed at him to shut up. But I heard. They all heard. A car pulled up behind Gerald's sedan. Diane stepped out, drawn by some maternal instinct that sensed catastrophe. She took in the scene with wide eyes. Her husband's purple face, Teresa's venom, me holding Eliza on the porch, the sold sign next door. She understood immediately. Her youngest daughter had found a way out. Diane began to cry. Not her usual quiet tears of apology, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She leaned against the car, unable to stand. For God's sake, Gerald snapped, stop making a scene, both of you. We will handle this like adults. Rosalind will see reason. She always does. But Diane did something unexpected. She looked at Gerald with an expression I had never seen. Exhaustion. Clarity. 38 years of suppressed truth rising to the surface. No, Diane said. Her voice was raw but steady. No, Gerald, she will not see reason. Because your reason destroyed this family. Your reason took everything Ruth built. Your reason made our daughter hate us. She looked at me through her tears. I should have stopped him years ago. I was afraid. I am still afraid, but I cannot watch this anymore. Gerald's composure shattered completely. He stormed toward the porch, finger jabbing at me. He threatened lawyers. He promised to contest Ruth's will publicly. He swore he would tell everyone what an ungrateful, scheming daughter I was. I did not flinch. I did not argue. I have Ruth's original will, I said calmly. I have documentation of every dollar you stole from her. I have evidence that you coerced a dying woman into signing documents she did not understand. Hire your lawyers. I will hire mine. Let us see who has more to lose. Gerald stopped. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in my memory, my father had nothing to say. I took Eliza's hand. We walked down the porch steps, past Gerald, past Teresa, past Kevin, who was already edging toward his car. We walked across the lawn, through the gap in the hedge, and onto Evelyn's property. Our property. The key slid into the lock. The door swung open. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating empty rooms waiting to be filled with our life. Mommy? Eliza's voice was small but stronger than before. Is this really ours? Forever? Forever, I said. No one can take this away from us. Not ever. I glanced back at Ruth's house one last time. Gerald stood in the yard, frozen with impotent rage. Teresa clutched her phone like a weapon she did not know how to use. Diane had not moved from her car. She watched me with something that might have been pride, or grief, or both. But as I turned to enter our new home, I saw Margaret Chen's car pulling onto Magnolia Lane. The lawyer parked quickly, stepped out, and waved a folder in the air. "Rosalind," she called. "We need to talk. Right now. I found something in the county records. Something your father does not want anyone to see." I paused on the threshold, one hand on my daughter, one hand on the door. The past was not finished with me yet. Margaret Chen crossed the lawn with a manila folder clutched to her chest like it contained something explosive. Her silver hair was disheveled. Her reading glasses sat crooked on her nose. She looked like someone who had spent the night pulling threads that unraveled into something enormous. I stood in the doorway of my new home, Eliza's hand in mine, watching the lawyer approach with mounting dread. Whatever she had found was urgent enough to bring her here unannounced. Whatever it was had erased her usual composure. "I went back through the county records," Margaret said, slightly breathless. "Something did not add up. The timeline of your father's will filing, the notary signatures, the witness statements." She held up the folder. "I found discrepancies. Serious discrepancies. From across the hedge, Gerald took a step forward. His face had shifted from rage to calculation. "Whatever she is telling you, it is lies," he called out. "That woman has always had it against our family." I opened the door wider. "Come inside," I told Margaret. Then I looked at my family still standing in Ruth's yard. "All of you. If you want to hear this, you are welcome. I have nothing to hide." They assembled in Evelyn's empty living room like witnesses at a trial they did not want to attend. Rosalind and Eliza stood near the fireplace. Gerald, Teresa, and Kevin clustered by the window, arms crossed, defenses raised. Diane hovered near the door, uncertain which side she belonged to. Margaret stood in the center, spreading documents across the hardwood floor. She produced Gerald's version of Ruth's will first, the one filed with probate court. She pointed to the notary stamp at the bottom. This notary, James Whitfield, had his license suspended 6 months before this document was allegedly signed, Margaret said. He could not have legally notarized anything during that period. Gerald sputtered about clerical errors, bureaucratic mix-ups, how none of this mattered because the will was already accepted by the court. Margaret produced another document, the witness signatures. "I tracked down these witnesses," she said. "2 names no one in your family recognizes. One is your father's former business partner. The other is Kevin's cousin." She paused. Neither of them remembers signing anything. When I showed them the document, they both said the signatures were not theirs. Teresa turned to her father. "Dad, what is she talking about?" "You said the will was legitimate. You said Grandma wanted this." Gerald's mask slipped. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an exit, an excuse, a way to regain control. He found nothing. He tried to deflect. He said Ruth was confused at the end. He said he was only trying to protect the family. He said I had poisoned Ruth against him. He said everything except the truth. Diane stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. "Gerald, stop. Just stop." She looked at Margaret. "I was there when he brought those papers to Ruth. She was on morphine. She could barely keep her eyes open. He told her it was hospital paperwork. He told her to sign." Gerald stared at his wife with naked betrayal. "You are supposed to be on my side," he hissed. Diane shook her head slowly. "I have been on your side for 38 years. I watched you bully your own mother. I watched you turn Teresa into a copy of yourself. I watched you break Rosalind's heart over and over." She straightened her spine. "No more. I choose my daughters. Both of them." Margaret continued, producing more documents from her folder. County property records, tax filings, mortgage applications. 3 years ago, she said, Gerald applied for a home equity loan using Ruth's house as collateral. The application listed him as sole owner. The loan was approved for $75,000. Ruth was still alive. Ruth never signed the application. She explained that Gerald had been forging Ruth's signature for years. Small transactions at first. A credit card application here, a car loan co-signed there, then larger crimes, the home equity loan, the revised will, a pattern of fraud stretching back almost a decade. Teresa looked genuinely shaken for the first time. She thought she was inheriting legitimately. She thought Ruth actually favored the family. She was wrong about everything. Kevin's face told a different story. He was not horrified, he was calculating, figuring out how to distance himself from Gerald, how to protect his own interests. The loyalty between conspirators was already fracturing. Margaret saved the worst revelation for last. "There is also the matter of Ruth's medical care," she said quietly. "I found billing records. Your father changed Ruth's healthcare proxy 6 weeks before she died. He removed Rosalind as decision-maker. He added himself. Then he stopped authorizing certain treatments. She let the implication hang in the air. Ruth might have lived longer, if someone had not decided she had lived long enough." The room went silent. Even Gerald seemed stunned by how far Margaret had dug. A knock at the door broke the tension. Evelyn Porter entered, leaning on a cane she did not need 3 weeks ago. Moving had aged her, but her eyes were sharp, her purpose clear. She looked at Gerald with undisguised contempt. "Ruth told me everything," Evelyn said. "Every visit you made to beg for money. Every lie you told to get her to sign papers. Every time you made her cry and then blamed her for being emotional." She described Ruth's final weeks, how Ruth knew she was dying, how she tried to fight Gerald's interference but was too weak, how she made Evelyn promise to watch over me, how she dictated letters and instructions because her hands could no longer write. "Ruth's last words to me were about you, Rosalind," Evelyn said, her voice cracking. "She said, 'Tell her I tried. Tell her I am sorry I was not braver. Tell her she deserves better than us.'" Evelyn reached into her pocket and produced a small cassette tape. Ruth recorded this 2 weeks before she passed. She wanted you to hear her voice, to know the truth from her own lips. "I have kept it safe for 3 years, waiting for the right moment." I took the tape with trembling hands. Ruth's voice, preserved. Ruth's testimony, waiting. Margaret gathered her documents and addressed the room directly, though her eyes stayed fixed on Gerald. With this evidence, she said, Rosalind can file criminal charges. Forgery, fraud, elder abuse. Possibly more, depending on what the investigation into Ruth's medical care reveals. She paused. Gerald could face prison time. Real prison time. Or, Margaret continued, Rosalind can choose not to prosecute. She can let Gerald sell Ruth's house to pay his debts. She can walk away from the inheritance she was owed. She can let the family shame remain private. Something broke in my father. The bluster drained away. He suddenly looked old, small, pathetic. "Rosalind," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, I am your father. I made mistakes. But prison? You would send your own father to prison?" I did not answer immediately. I looked at Eliza, who was watching everything with wide, uncertain eyes. I looked at Diane, who was crying quietly. I looked at Teresa, who could not meet my gaze. "I have not decided anything yet," I said finally. "But I want you to understand something. For the first time in my life, I have the power. Not you, me. And I am going to take my time deciding what to do with it." Teresa erupted, not with anger, with panic. She admitted she knew about some of the forgeries. Not all, but enough. She admitted she helped Gerald pressure Ruth in those final months. She admitted she took money from Ruth's accounts without asking. She admitted she hated me for being Ruth's favorite, for being the good daughter, for making her look bad by comparison. Then she fell to her knees in the middle of the empty living room. She begged me not to prosecute. She talked about Mason and Mia, about how the twins needed their mother, about how she would lose everything. I watched my sister grovel and felt nothing, not satisfaction, not pity, just exhaustion and clarity. "You are worried about your children," I said quietly. "That is good. Hold on to that feeling. Remember it, because I spent 3 years worrying about my child while you treated her like garbage. Welcome to motherhood, Teresa. I told everyone to leave. I needed time to think. I needed to listen to Ruth's tape. I needed to decide what kind of person I wanted to be." Gerald left first, shoulders hunched, a broken man. Teresa followed, mascara streaked down her face. Kevin trailed behind, already on his phone, probably calling a lawyer. Diane did not move. She stood by the door, hands clasped, waiting. "Can I stay?" she asked, "not to convince you of anything. Just to be here, with you, with Eliza, if you will let me." Before I could answer, Eliza tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered, "let Grandma stay." She looks sad, like she needs a hug. I looked at my mother, at my daughter, at the space between forgiveness and self-protection. I had the power now. The question was how I would use it. I opened the door wider, not all the way, just enough. 2 days passed in silence. I sat in my new living room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, watching dust motes drift through afternoon sunlight. Eliza was at school. Diane slept in the guest room upstairs, exhausted from crying, exhausted from decades of pretending. The house smelled like fresh paint and possibility, but my mind kept returning to darker places. Ruth's voice still echoed in my memory. I had listened to the cassette tape alone, after Eliza fell asleep, after Diane retreated upstairs. Ruth's words were simple and clear. A grandmother apologizing for the family she raised, a woman explaining why she chose me. A final goodbye that felt like permission to do whatever I needed to do next. I held the power to destroy my father, to send him to prison, to expose Teresa's complicity to the world. Margaret had the evidence. The witnesses were willing. Justice was within reach. But justice and peace are not always the same thing. I stared out the window at Ruth's house, soon to belong to strangers, and wondered what kind of person I wanted to become. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Gerald's voice sounded nothing like the man who had threatened me 2 days ago. It was thin, reedy, the voice of someone who had not slept, had not eaten, had not stopped calculating escape routes that did not exist. He asked to meet. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no Teresa. He said he wanted to explain. He said there were things I did not understand about why he became who he was. He said he was my father, and that had to mean something. Every instinct told me to refuse. This was manipulation. This was Gerald trying to regain control. But there was also curiosity. I wanted to understand how my father became this person. I wanted to see him without his mask. I agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. Public space, neutral ground. I did not tell Diane or Margaret. This conversation needed to happen between father and daughter, whatever that meant anymore. Before hanging up, Gerald said something strange. His voice dropped to a whisper. I know you found everything in the safe deposit box, but there is one thing Ruth did not know. One thing I never told anyone. Come alone, and I will tell you the truth about why I am the way I am. Gerald sat in a corner booth when I arrived, nursing a cup of coffee he had not touched. He looked 10 years older than he did last week. His shirt was wrinkled. His hands trembled slightly. This was not the patriarch who had ruled our family with intimidation and guilt. This was the wreckage of a man who had finally lost. I sat across from him without ordering anything. I did not speak first. I had learned that silence was a weapon against people who needed to fill it. Gerald began talking. About his own father, about growing up with a man who measured love in dollars and respect in fear, about learning that the only way to survive was to take before you were taken from. He described his childhood with clinical detachment, the beatings when he failed to meet expectations, the humiliation in front of relatives, the constant reminder that he was worthless unless he proved otherwise through acquisition and dominance. I swore I would be different, Gerald said. His eyes were fixed on the table. I swore I would never become him. And then I woke up one day and realized I had become something worse. He looked up at me with something that might have been genuine pain. I know it does not justify anything, but I need you to understand. I did not decide to be a monster. I was made. By my father. By circumstance. By fear. Then he added something I did not expect. Your grandmother Ruth knew what my father was. She watched him destroy me for 18 years, and she never intervened, not once. She protected herself. She let me drown. So yes, I took from her. I took what I believed I was owed. I asked about the money, the real numbers, the full extent of the damage he had caused. Gerald laid it out without flinching. The second mortgage on his own home, the credit card debt that had spiraled beyond control, the business loans that went bad, the gambling, yes, gambling, online poker, sports betting, a secret addiction that started small and swallowed everything, $200,000 in debt, minimum payments eating his retirement, collection calls every day. The house sale was supposed to fix everything. Ruth's house and Evelyn's property together would have cleared the debt and left enough for Teresa to start over. He admitted that Teresa knew about the plan to pressure me out. She helped orchestrate the campaign. But she did not know about the forged documents. She did not know about the coercion at Ruth's deathbed. She was greedy, yes, but she was not criminal. That was all Gerald. Kevin knew everything, Gerald continued. Kevin helped research how to forge documents. Kevin found the corrupt notary. Kevin was supposed to get $30,000 for his assistance. He paused. And Kevin recorded some of our conversations. Insurance, he called it. If this goes to trial, he will turn on me in a heartbeat. He has already hired his own lawyer. Your sister does not know yet. Gerald leaned forward, desperation naked on his face. He made me an offer. If I did not press charges, he would sign over Ruth's house to me. The original will restored. The property returned to its rightful owner. He would sell his own home to pay his debts. He would leave Austin. Start over somewhere far away. Disappear. You get everything Ruth wanted you to have, Gerald said. You get justice without the courthouse. You get to raise Eliza without your father's trial in the headlines. You get peace. Part of me wanted to accept the easy path, the clean ending. But Ruth's voice echoed in my memory. Do not let them make you small. Do not let them teach Eliza that she does not deserve to take up space. I shook my head. I do not want Ruth's house, I said. I have my own house now, one that was given to me by people who actually loved me. Gerald looked confused. If I did not want the house, what did I want? Revenge? His suffering? His destruction? I want you to understand something, I said slowly. For the first time in your life, you have no power over me. Not guilt, not obligation, not even anger. I feel nothing for you, Dad, and that is the worst punishment I can imagine for a man like you. The coffee shop door slammed open. Teresa stormed in with Kevin trailing behind. She had spotted my car outside. She had been driving around the city looking for Gerald, convinced he would try to cut a separate deal. What did you tell her? Teresa demanded. What did you promise? Gerald tried to calm her. Kevin hung back near the entrance, phone in hand, documenting everything. Teresa accused Gerald of throwing her under the bus. Gerald accused Teresa of being ungrateful. Kevin edged toward the door, already planning his exit. In her rage, Teresa let something slip. If you had just let me handle the will like I wanted to, none of this would have happened, she shouted. My guy at the courthouse would have buried the original. But no, you had to use your own people, your own sloppy forgeries. She stopped, realized what she had said, realized I had heard every word. I stood up. I had heard enough, more than enough. I placed a $20 bill on the table for coffee no one had drunk. I am not going to press charges, I said. All three of them froze. Not because you deserve mercy, I continued. Because I do not want to spend the next 2 years in courtrooms reliving what you did to Ruth. I do not want Eliza reading about her grandfather's trial. I do not want to become someone defined by your crimes. I laid out my conditions. Gerald would sell Ruth's house. He would use the money to pay his debts. He would never contact me or Eliza again. If he tried to sue me, threaten me, or manipulate me in any way, Margaret would file everything with the district attorney. The statute of limitations on fraud was 4 years. I had plenty of time to change my mind. Gerald sagged with relief. Teresa stared in disbelief. Kevin was already heading for the exit. One more thing, I said from the doorway. Mom stays with me. If you try to pressure her to come back, I will consider that a violation of our agreement. I drove back to Magnolia Lane as the sun began to set. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind was quiet. I had made a choice. Not revenge, not forgiveness. Something in between. Something that felt like me. Diane stood on the porch of my house, clutching something small in her hands. Her face was anxious but hopeful. I found this in my things, she said. She held out a small velvet box. It belonged to Ruth's mother. Your great-grandmother. Ruth gave it to me on my wedding day. She said to give it to the daughter who needed it most. Her voice broke. I think she meant you. I think she always meant you. Inside the box was a ring, simple gold band with a small ruby, and an inscription I could barely read in the fading light. "There is something else," Diane whispered. "Something I should have told you years ago. About Ruth. About why Gerald hated her so much." She took my hand. "Can we talk? Inside?" I looked at my mother, at the ring, at the house that was finally mine. The past kept unfolding, but for the first time, I was ready to meet it. Diane and I sat at the kitchen table with the velvet box open between us. The ruby ring caught the lamplight, casting small red shadows on the wood. Eliza was upstairs reading herself to sleep, and the house had settled into that particular quiet that comes after storms pass. I held the ring up to read the inscription inside the band. "For the daughter who chooses love over legacy." The words felt like a riddle, a message from the past that I could not quite decode. Diane wrapped both hands around her teacup. She took a breath that seemed to draw from somewhere deep and old and painful. "Ruth was not Gerald's biological mother," she said. "She adopted him when he was 4 years old. No one knows. Not Teresa. Not anyone outside this room." I stared at my mother as my entire understanding of my family shifted and cracked and reformed into something unrecognizable. Gerald Morrison, the man who spent his entire life demanding blood loyalty, who dismissed Eliza as not real family, who rejected my daughter for being adopted, was himself adopted. Diane explained that Ruth told her this secret on the night before she married Gerald. It was meant as a warning disguised as a confession. Ruth married young to a man named Henry Morrison. They tried for years to have children. It never happened. Henry blamed Ruth for the failure. He grew bitter, then cruel, then absent. Eventually, he abandoned her entirely, leaving nothing but debt and shame. Ruth adopted Gerald from a county orphanage when she was 32 years old, a quiet adoption handled through her church. Back then, such things were not discussed openly. Gerald's original birth certificate was sealed. His new one listed Ruth as his mother. The secret was buried so deep that even Gerald did not know the truth. But secrets never stay buried forever. When Gerald was 16, he found the adoption papers in Ruth's home safe. He was looking for something else. Money, probably. And he discovered instead that his entire identity was a lie. He confronted Ruth. She tried to explain that she chose him, that she loved him, that biology did not define family. He called her a liar. He said she had stolen his real identity. He said he would never forgive her. Ruth spent the rest of her life trying to earn his love, Diane said. She gave him money whenever he asked. She tolerated his cruelty without complaint. She watched him become exactly like the absent father who had abandoned her, and she blamed herself. She thought if she had told him sooner, if she had been a better mother, he might have turned out different. The inscription on the ring suddenly made sense. For the daughter who chooses love over legacy. Ruth had the ring made after Gerald rejected her. She kept it for 50 years, waiting for a Morrison woman who would understand that family is built, not born. "She wanted you to have it," Diane said. "She told me on her deathbed. She said you were the only one who truly understood what family means. She said Eliza proved that love does not need blood." Diane reached across the table and took my hand. "I am sorry I was not brave enough to tell you sooner. I am sorry I let Gerald make me small for so long. I am sorry I chose comfort over my children." Her voice broke. "Can you ever forgive me?" I did not answer right away. Forgiveness was not something I could give in a single moment, but I could offer something else. I squeezed her hand and let her stay. 1 month passed. Spring arrived in Austin with blue bonnets blooming along the highways and the oak tree between our properties bursting into full green leaf. The world kept turning, indifferent to the drama that had consumed my family. Rosalind and Eliza had settled into our new home. Boxes were unpacked, furniture was arranged. The walls displayed photographs of the people who mattered. Ruth and Eliza at the park, Marcus and me on our wedding day, Diane and me as a child before everything went wrong. And a new family portrait taken in the backyard last week, just the three of us. Rosalind, Eliza, and Diane standing in the garden Evelyn left behind. The change in Eliza was remarkable. She laughed again. She drew pictures again. She ran through the yard without looking over her shoulder for permission. She had started calling Diane Grandma without any prompting, and the word sounded natural now, earned through presence rather than demanded through obligation. Diane filed for legal separation 2 weeks after moving in with us. She rented a small apartment 3 blocks away and came for dinner every night. She was learning, slowly and painfully, how to be a person outside of Gerald's shadow. I noticed small changes in my mother. She started wearing colors. After 38 years of beige and gray, she bought a red sweater, a blue scarf, yellow earrings that caught the light when she laughed, small rebellions, quiet declarations that she still existed. The moving truck came for Ruth's house on a Tuesday morning. I watched from my kitchen window as strangers carried furniture through the door I had walked through 1,000 times. A young couple had bought the property, newlyweds from Houston, starting fresh. They smiled when they first saw the oak tree. They talked about children and gardens and growing old together on this street. Gerald sold the house for slightly below asking price. He needed the money fast. His debts were worse than even he had admitted. Teresa and Kevin finalized their divorce 3 weeks ago, the marriage collapsing under the weight of mutual blame and mounting legal fees. Gerald moved to Florida without saying goodbye. A condo near his sister, a woman I had met twice in my entire life. He did not leave a forwarding address. Margaret said he signed away all claims to Ruth's estate in exchange for my silence. The agreement was legally binding. The chapter was closed. I expected to feel something when Ruth's house changed hands. Grief, maybe, or triumph. Instead, I felt only peace. The house was never the point. Ruth's love was the inheritance that mattered, and that no one could sell or steal or destroy. The new owners waved at me as they carried boxes inside. I waved back. Neighbors. Strangers who might become friends. The street was moving on. Life was moving on. My phone rang during dinner one evening. Teresa's name on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. Her voice was thin and hollow. She had lost the house in the divorce settlement, lost Kevin's income. The twins were confused and acting out at school. She needed money, just a small loan, just enough to cover rent until she found a job. She promised to pay it back. She swore things would be different this time. I remembered every dollar I had given Teresa over the years, the credit card debt, the car payments, the elaborate baby shower that cost $3,000. None of it was ever acknowledged. None of it was ever returned. No, I said. The word felt foreign in my mouth. I had never said no to Teresa before. I cannot help you. There was silence on the line. Then anger. Teresa called me selfish, cruel. She said she had changed. She said family should stick together, the same manipulation, the same playbook, the same expectation that I would fold under pressure. Goodbye, Teresa, I said. I hope you find what you are looking for, but you will not find it from me. I hung up. I blocked her number. I returned to dinner. Eliza looked up from her plate with curious eyes. Was that Aunt Teresa? I nodded. Are you sad? She asked. I considered the question honestly, searching my feelings for grief or guilt or regret. I found none. No, I said. I think I am finally free. After dinner, Eliza and I hung the last photograph on the living room wall, the place of honor, above the fireplace. Ruth holding Eliza at 5 years old, both of them laughing at something off camera. The day they met. The day Ruth declared Eliza her great-granddaughter, blood or no blood. Eliza studied the photograph with serious eyes. "Mommy," she said, "do you think great-grandma Ruth can see us? Do you think she knows we are happy?" I knelt beside my daughter and wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "I think she knows," I said. "I think she always knew we would end up here. I think she made sure of it." We stood together, looking at Ruth's face, the grandmother who saw me clearly when everyone else looked right through me, the great-grandmother who claimed Eliza completely without hesitation. the woman who planned from beyond the grave to give us both a home. "I miss her," Eliza said quietly. "Me too," I replied. "But missing someone is just love with nowhere to go. And we can put that love into this house, into each other, into every day we get to spend together." Later that evening, just as I was tucking Eliza into bed, there was a knock at the front door. Soft. Hesitant. "I will get it," Eliza shouted, already running down the stairs before I could stop her. She threw open the door to find Diane standing on the porch, holding a homemade chocolate cake. My favorite. Her hands were shaking slightly. Her smile was nervous and hopeful and fragile. "I know I come over every night," Diane said, "but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a celebration." "Is that silly?" Before I could answer, Eliza grabbed Diane's hand and pulled her inside. "Grandma, come see the picture we hung up. It is great, Grandma Ruth. She is watching over us now." I watched my mother and daughter walk into the living room together. 3 generations. 2 survivors. 1 family, finally healing. But as Diane passed me in the hallway, she leaned close and whispered something that made my heart skip. "Margaret called today. She found something else in the county records. Something about Ruth's original will. There may be more than we thought. Much more." Margaret spread the documents across my kitchen table the next morning, while Eliza played in the backyard and Diane watched from the window. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating pages that contained one final gift from a grandmother who refused to stop protecting us even from beyond the grave. Ruth's original will contained a clause no one had noticed. A trust. Small but significant. She set aside $25,000 in a separate account, designated specifically for Eliza's education. Gerald never knew about this account. Neither did Teresa. Ruth opened it at a different bank, under a different lawyer's oversight. She funded it quietly over 5 years with small deposits that went unnoticed. The account matured last month. I stared at the documents with tears forming in my eyes. Even from the grave, Ruth continued providing, continued loving in the only language she had left. Preparation, foresight, care encoded in legal paperwork and hidden accounts. "Ruth knew exactly what she was doing," Margaret said softly. "She built walls your father could not climb. She created a fortress around the people she loved most." Margaret walked me through the details. The trust could not be touched until Eliza turned 18. It was protected from creditors, from family claims, from any legal challenge Gerald might attempt. Ruth had thought of everything. Inside the trust documents, Margaret found one more envelope. Ruth's handwriting on the front read, "For Eliza, on her 18th birthday. Sealed. Private." A grandmother's words waiting a decade to be read. I would not open it. This letter belonged to Eliza. When the time came, my daughter would read Ruth's words as a young woman stepping into adulthood with the blessing of someone who believed in her completely. $25,000. Not a fortune by some standards. But for Eliza, it meant options. College without crushing debt. A car to drive to her first job. A security deposit on her first apartment. Freedom. Margaret mentioned one more detail before she left. The trust account had a name. Ruth called it the Eliza Morrison Future Fund. Not education fund or college savings. Future. Ruth was investing in every possibility my daughter might become. After Margaret drove away, I walked outside to find Eliza elbow-deep in soil with Diane kneeling beside her. They were planting marigolds, Ruth's favorite flower. Evelyn had left seeds and instructions before moving to Seattle, a final gift from one neighbor to another. The garden was coming alive around them. Tomato plants climbed along the fence. Herbs grew in terracotta pots by the door. A rose bush transplanted from Ruth's yard before the new owners moved in added splashes of red and pink. I had asked permission to take it. They understood. I watched my mother work beside my daughter. Diane's hands were dirty, her hair was loose. She was laughing at something Eliza said. A genuine laugh, unguarded and warm. This was not the woman who spent 38 years apologizing for existing. This was someone new, someone emerging. Eliza stood up and brushed dirt from her knees. "I want to draw a picture of our garden," she announced. "For Great-Grandma Ruth, we can hang it next to her photograph." She ran inside without waiting for permission. She did not ask if she was allowed. She simply knew she belonged. The young couple from Ruth's house walked over that afternoon, carrying a bottle of wine and nervous smiles. Jake and Maria, married 8 months, expecting their first child in October. They wanted to introduce themselves properly. We sat on my porch together, 4 adults sharing stories as the afternoon stretched long and golden. Jake worked in software development. Maria taught elementary school. They fell in love with the oak tree before they even stepped inside the house. I told them about Ruth, about the garden she planted over 40 years, about the swing she hung from the oak tree for grandchildren who rarely visited, about how she sat on her porch every evening, watching the street, waving at everyone who passed. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She placed a hand on her belly. "We are going to name her Ruth," she said. "If it is a girl." We did not know who Ruth was when we bought the house, just that her name was on the original deed. But now that you have told us about her, it feels right. It feels like she is supposed to be part of our story, too. I looked at Ruth's house, no longer Ruth's, but carrying her forward anyway. A baby named Ruth would grow up in that yard, would climb that oak tree, would continue a story that my father tried to end. The inheritance no one could steal. That evening, I cooked Ruth's recipe for pot roast, the one written in her handwriting on a stained index card I found in her kitchen drawer years ago. Diane set the table with dishes from Evelyn's collection, floral patterns from another era, beautiful in their gentle imperfection. Eliza presented her drawing with ceremony, the garden rendered in crayon and colored pencil. 3 figures stood in the foreground, me, Eliza, and Diane. A 4th figure watched from a cloud above, smiling with her arms open wide. "That is Great-Grandma Ruth," Eliza explained. "She is not sad. She is proud of us." We hung the drawing on the wall beside Ruth's photograph. Grandmother and great-grandmother side by side. Past and present. Memory and continuation. Diane said grace before dinner. She had not prayed in years, but tonight felt sacred. She thanked God for food and family and second chances. She thanked Ruth for watching over us. Her voice broke on Ruth's name. No one pretended not to notice. After the amen, Eliza reached for my hand on one side and Diane's on the other. "We should do this every night," she said, holding hands, being thankful, being together. And we did. It became our ritual, our anchor, our daily proof that we survived. After dishes were washed and Eliza was tucked into bed, I sat alone on the porch. The street was quiet. Crickets sang in the grass. The oak tree rustled in the evening breeze, its branches stretching over both yards like arms embracing everything below. I thought about the past few months, the ambush in the backyard, the letter hidden in a jewelry box, the key that unlocked everything, the confrontation that shattered my family and freed me simultaneously. I thought about what I lost, a father who never loved me the way I needed, a sister who saw me as competition instead of kin, a version of myself that believed belonging required shrinking, that love had to be purchased through endless sacrifice. I thought about what I gained, a home that was truly mine, a mother rediscovering herself, a daughter learning she deserved to take up space, and Ruth, always Ruth, a grandmother who loved me enough to fight from beyond the grave. Revenge was never the point. I did not need Gerald punished. I did not need Teresa humiliated. I needed to stop making myself small. I needed to claim my own life. Everything else was just noise. I used to think strength meant enduring, I whispered to the darkness. Now I know strength means choosing yourself, even when it terrifies you, even when everyone says you are wrong. I retrieved Ruth's cassette tape from the drawer where I kept precious things. I had listened to it many times now, but tonight I needed her voice one more time. The tape crackled through the old player. Ruth's voice filled the porch, thin but certain. the voice of a woman who knew death was coming and refused to leave without saying goodbye. My darling girl, if you are hearing this, you survived them. You found your courage. You chose yourself. I always knew you would. I just wish I could have been there to see it. There was a pause, the sound of labored breathing. Take care of Eliza. Take care of your mother if she lets you, and take care of yourself. You deserve happiness, Rosalind. You always did. I love you. I will love you forever. Now go live. The tape clicked off. Silence filled the porch. I let the tears fall. Not from grief, from gratitude. I whispered back to the darkness where Ruth was listening. I love you too, Grandma, and I am living. Finally, I am living. Morning came soft and golden. I stood in my garden with coffee in hand, watching Eliza chase butterflies through the marigolds. Diane waved from the kitchen window, already preparing breakfast. The oak tree stretched overhead, connecting past to present, memory to hope. I was not the woman who stood frozen in her backyard 3 months ago, watching her father try to steal everything. I was not the woman who packed boxes in surrender, teaching her daughter that love meant disappearing. I was someone new, someone who chose herself, someone who built a home from the wreckage of a family that tried to erase her. They wanted me to be small, but I became everything they feared. Not angry, not vengeful, just free. And that is where my story ends. Or maybe where it truly begins. I shared this with you because I know I am not the only one. There are women listening right now who are packing boxes they do not want to pack, saying yes when everything inside them screams no, teaching their children that belonging means shrinking. If that is you, I want you to hear this. You deserve to take up space. You deserve a home no one can take from you. You deserve to stop asking permission to exist. And if this story gave you even one moment of hope, one moment of recognition, one moment where you thought maybe I can choose myself too, then Ruth's legacy lives on. Not just in me, in you. Thank you for staying until the end. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories about women who stopped shrinking and started living, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss one, and leave me a comment. Tell me about the moment you chose yourself, or the moment you are still working toward. I read every single one, because we are not alone in this. We never were. We just forgot how to find each other. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.